All right, let's get into it. Today we're going to take all that raw site data and turn it into a pro-level blueprint for a high-performance solar PV layout. This is where we move from just numbers to a design that's efficient, safe, and, actually built to last.
Okay, let's kick things off with a piece of advice that you should really take to heart. A great PV layout isn't just about cramming as many panels as you can onto a roof. It's about finding that perfect balance. Technical efficiency, how it looks, and making sure it's easy to maintain. This is the bedrock of smart, sustainable design. So here's how we're going to tackle this. We'll walk through a 5-step process that's pretty much exactly how you do it in the real world. We'll start with the big ideas, the core principles, and take it all the way to that final, signed-off drawing.
All right, first things first, let's talk about the non-negotiables. These are the absolute foundational rules for every single successful PV layout. If you get these right, you're setting the whole project up for success right from the get-go.
So you can think of these as your 4 pillars. First, your orientation. You want it facing the sun. Then, the right tilt angle. Third, proper spacing so the panels don't cast shadows on each other. And finally, making sure there's room to get in there for maintenance. Nailing these 4 points is absolutely the first step to cranking out the most energy and making sure the system has a long, healthy life.
And this right here perfectly shows why accessibility is so important. I mean, it seems obvious, right? But if you can't safely get to a system to clean it and do maintenance, its performance is just going to drop over time. It's inevitable. Okay, so we've got the principles down. Now let's figure out what we're actually working with. Let's define our canvas. Because, as every technician knows, you can't use every square inch of a roof. And this right here is the critical difference. You don't design for the total roof area, you design for the usable area. And what does that mean? It means you have to account for all the real-world stuff. Vents, pipes, those safety setbacks from the edge, right from the very beginning. So here's the formula. It looks simple, and it is, but it's a super powerful tool you're going to use on every single project. It keeps your designs realistic and grounded in what's actually possible on the site. Okay. Let's run through a quick example to see how this works. Let's say we start with a total roof area of 500 square meters. Nice big roof. Now from that 500, we have to take away the space we can't use. We've got obstacles and required safety setbacks. In this case, that adds up to 80 square meters that are totally off limits for our panels.
So what does that leave us with? 420 square meters. That is our actual working area. That's our true canvas for the PV layout.
All right, our space is defined. Now it's time to switch gears and think electrically. How do we take all these individual panels and wire them up to create one big, powerful array? This is a really core concept, so let's break it down. You've got 2 main ways to connect things. First, you connect modules in series, end to end, to make what we call a string. That increases your total voltage. Then, you take those strings and connect them in parallel. That increases your total current. So, just remember, series for volts, parallel for amps. Simple as that.
And listen up, because this is a huge pro tip right from the field. Keep those DC cables as short as possible. Why? Because long cables mean more voltage drop, which means you're losing precious energy as heat before it even gets to the inverter. This is a simple layout choice that gives you a direct efficiency boost.
Okay, next up, let's figure out where to put the brains of the operation. We're talking about the inverter and all the other balance of system, or BOS components. For these absolutely critical parts, location is everything.
Now, these rules for placing your inverter, they aren't just suggestions for making things convenient. Following them directly impacts your system's efficiency, its safety, and how long it's going to last. A hot, cramped inverter is an unhappy, underperforming inverter, period.
And if you want to know if this actually matters, just look at the real-world payoff. Check this out. On one project, they simply moved the inverter from 30 meters away to just 10 meters away. The result? A 2.5% boost in system efficiency. That is a huge amount of extra energy over the life of the system, all from one smart placement decision. This little diagram shows you the whole journey the energy takes. It goes from the PV array to the DC-DB to the inverter, then the AC-DB, and finally out to the load. It really drives home why keeping those first few components, the array, the DC box, and the inverter, super close together is so critical for cutting down those DC power losses. Okay, we're in the home stretch. Let's bring all of these pieces together into what is arguably the single most important document of the whole process, the professional layout drawing. This is the blueprint for the entire installation.
This drawing has one job, to be a crystal clear guide for the installation team. To be considered professional, it absolutely has to include these 6 key things. No ifs, ands, or buts. This isn't the place to take shortcuts.
And super important, remember that your plan isn't actually finished until it's been verified. You need sign-offs from a structural engineer to make sure the roof can handle the load, and you need approval from both your client and the local utility. This step is what protects everyone, the installer, the client, and the project itself.
So, to wrap it all up, a really well-done layout is so much more than just a drawing on a piece of paper. It is the fundamental blueprint that guarantees your project is going to deliver decades of efficient, safe, and reliable clean energy.
So there you have it. You've got the whole process, from the big principles all the way to the final drawing. The only question is, are you ready to put it into practice? All right, here's your call to action. Take everything you've just learned, get your hands on a real site sketch, and create your own scaled layout. Seriously, there is no better way to really lock in these skills and make them your own.